I've always believed that hard work and relentless dedication could shield me from life's unfairness. For years, I was the go-to person for my clients, someone they could always count on, even when the workload threatened to bury me alive. My name is Jacob, and I was an account manager at a small but growing marketing firm. I lived by my father's motto, over-deliver, and you'll never be underappreciated. Turns out he was wrong. I still remember the day everything shifted. It was a damp Tuesday morning, the kind that seems to cling to your skin and weigh you down before the day even starts. I was in the middle of juggling 5 client accounts, each more demanding than the last, when my manager called me into his glass-walled office. His face was a mask of forced politeness, but his eyes betrayed a cold, calculated resolve. "Jacob," he said, his voice syrupy smooth, "we need to talk about your performance." My stomach twisted. I knew I'd been outperforming every metric they threw at me. My clients loved me. I answered emails at midnight, took calls on weekends, and always found a way to exceed their expectations. So, what the hell was going on? He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands like a disappointed father. "You're overperforming," he said. "It's causing friction." I blinked, trying to process. Friction? With who? My clients. Are happy, ecstatic even. They're extending contracts, increasing budgets. "What do you mean, friction?" He let out a sigh that made me feel like I was the unreasonable one. "Jacob, your success makes others uncomfortable. Some of the team feels overshadowed, and frankly, it's creating disharmony." I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. My ears rang, and my throat went dry. My mind raced through every late night, every desperate attempt to ensure my clients got nothing but the best. And here he was, telling me that my hard work, the very thing that should have protected me, was the reason I was being cut loose. He slid a thin envelope across the table. "We're letting you go, effective immediately. HR will walk you through the exit process." I stared at that envelope, the corporate bullet that ended everything I'd built. My mind screamed, but no words came out. My manager's face blurred as hot tears welled up. Not from sadness, but from the raw, white-hot betrayal that clawed at my chest. I'd given everything, every ounce of myself, and they called it a problem. They didn't care about the loyalty I'd shown, the relationships I'd nurtured, or the nights I'd spent working so late I forgot what my own bed felt like. All that mattered to them was keeping things comfortable for everyone else. I walked out of that office, the thin envelope in my hand, my head spinning with disbelief and anger. My clients didn't know yet. I didn't know how I'd face them. But in that moment, as I stepped into the cold gray corridor outside, I realized that this was just the beginning. This betrayal wasn't the end of my story. It was the spark that would set everything ablaze. The first few days after I was fired were a blur of disbelief and raw emotion. I couldn't make sense of it. I kept replaying that meeting in my head, trying to find some logic in what felt like a cruel joke. I spent entire nights staring at the ceiling, the words "overperforming" echoing like a curse in my mind. My friends tried to console me, telling me it wasn't my fault, that the company was just threatened by my success. But their reassurances fell flat. I needed answers, not comfort. The hardest part was telling my clients. They were more than just business contacts to me. They were people I'd built trust with over years of hard work. I drafted email after email, each one sounding too formal, too detached, too final. In the end, I just told them the truth, that I was no longer with the company. But I hoped to stay in touch. The responses poured in faster than I expected. Some of them were confused, others angry. A few even hinted at wanting to follow me wherever. I ended up, their loyalty was comforting, but it also planted a seed of suspicion. If my firing was about performance friction, why did the people I worked for, my clients, feel blindsided and furious? I tried to let it go, but something kept nagging at me. I started noticing little things that didn't add up. Emails from the company's shared account to my clients' messages I'd never sent were popping up in my inbox as forwards from angry clients. They were polite but sterile, offering vague reassurances and barely acknowledging the upheaval I'd caused in their carefully built campaigns, One email from a client named Marissa especially stuck with me. She was one of my oldest clients, the kind who'd call just to chat about her kids or ask about mine. Her message was terse, clipped in a way I'd never seen before. Jacob, I don't understand. They told me you left because you couldn't handle the workload anymore. I thought you were the one who kept pushing for more. My blood went cold. I'd never once said anything about not being able to handle the workload of anything. I was the one asking for bigger projects, pushing the limits to get results. Why would they tell her that? The more I thought about it, the more I realized this was bigger than me just being let go. I started combing through old emails, searching for anything that might help me understand what was really going on. I found nothing concrete, just the usual chatter about deadlines and deliverables. But something felt off, like there was a layer of conversation happening just out of sight. One night, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, trying to figure out if it was all in my head. I looked tired, older, somehow like the weight of the betrayal had aged me overnight. My reflection stared back at me with the same haunted look I'd seen in the office that day. When my manager told me I was too good at my job, I couldn't let it go. I needed to know why they'd done this, why they'd sabotaged my reputation, my relationships, my entire career. I reached out to a few colleagues I trusted, people I'd shared late-night pizza with after long campaign launches, and early morning coffee runs when the office was still dark. But even they seemed distant. It's like they'd been warned off. Look, Jacob, one of them finally said, her voice low and tense. I don't want to get involved, they've been saying. Things about you, that you were going behind their backs trying to poach clients. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Poach clients? I was working my ass off to keep them happy for the company. No, she said, but they're framing it like you were trying to build your own book of business, like you were too close to the clients. Management doesn't like that. They think it makes them look weak. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to demand she tell me every word she'd heard. I could hear the fear in her voice, the same fear I'd seen in my manager's eyes when he fired me. This wasn't just about me. This was about control, about a company that saw loyalty as a threat instead of a strength. That night, I lay in bed with my phone clutched in my hand, scrolling through every client message, every social media post, every hint that someone might be telling a different story than the one I'd lived. The pieces weren't fitting together yet. The shape of the puzzle was becoming clearer. Someone at that company wanted me gone, and they'd do whatever it took to make sure I stayed gone. The anger in my chest was white hot, but beneath, it was something else. Resolve. They'd taken my job, my sense of security, and tried to turn my own clients against me. But I wasn't about to let them rewrite my story. I didn't have proof yet, but I had the will to find it. I was done being the loyal soldier who swallowed his questions. I was ready to dig until I found the truth. The turning point came on. A night when sleep wouldn't come, and my thoughts were a storm that wouldn't settle. I sat at my kitchen table with a bottle of whiskey and a stack of old notebooks filled with scribbled meeting notes and reminders. I told myself I wasn't going to find anything new, but I kept going back to Maurice's email, her confusion, her disappointment. That was my anchor. I remembered that every meeting we'd had with clients was logged in the company's project management tool. I still had access to its some oversight in the scramble to kick me out. My fingers trembled as I logged in, feeling like an intruder. In a place that had once felt like home, I navigated to the meeting notes, and my heart pounded as I read through them. It was all there. It's buried in the dry corporate language. Updates on client meetings I hadn't attended, notes signed off by my manager and another senior account manager. They'd been rewriting the narrative, framing every project win as if I'd just been riding the wave instead of making the wave itself. They made it sound like I was struggling to keep up, not leading the charge. I scrolled further and then I found it. An internal email thread. The subject line read, Jacob's accounts. My stomach clenched as I read the messages. My manager was telling the team to reassure clients that I had overcommitted, that my departure was necessary for the firm's stability. He was spinning my best qualities, my relentless drive, my late nights, my constant client check-ins into A story of desperation and recklessness. One line stuck out like a dagger. We'll have to position this carefully so clients don't start questioning our processes. Tell them Jacob was burning out and needed to step back. It'll make us look like we're taking care of our people. I sat there, hands shaking. So this was it. They weren't just covering their tracks. They were rewriting the whole story. Turning my loyalty into a liability. I wanted to throw my phone against the wall, scream into the night, but I forced myself to stay calm. If they thought they could erase me that easily, they were wrong. I wouldn't let them bury the truth. Beneath their corporate spin, I started printing everything. Every email, every meeting note, every hint of the conspiracy they'd built around me. I didn't have a plan yet, but I knew one thing: my clients needed to see the truth. They deserved better than the lies they were being fed, but I couldn't act recklessly. I'd already seen how easily they twisted my loyalty into a weapon. Against me. If I was going to fight back, I needed to be smart. So I reached out to Marissa. I told her I'd been let go under false pretenses and that there was more to the story. I asked her to keep it quiet for now. I didn't want to drag her into the mess unless she was willing. Her response was immediate and fierce. Jacob, I've always known you were the real deal. Tell me what you need. I'm in. It gave me the boost I needed. One ally, one person who believed me, and suddenly the darkness didn't feel so suffocating. I started making a list of every client who'd reached out to me, every colleague who might still have a shred of decency left. I didn't trust easily anymore, but I trusted my instincts. And they were telling me I wasn't alone in this fight. I spent days gathering evidence, piecing together the timeline. Every detail, every discrepancy, I documented it all. I even reached out to a friend of mine who worked in corporate compliance, someone who knew how to read between the lines of sanitized boardroom statements. What you're describing, she told me, her voice low and serious, is classic reputational sabotage. They're managing the narrative so it doesn't blow back on them. I asked her what I could do to expose it without getting buried under legal threats. She gave me a cautious but determined nod. You need to document everything: emails, timestamps, even your own notes about when things happened. If you can, show a pattern. You'll have a case for defamation or wrongful termination. Her words fueled me. I wasn't just a casualty of office politics. I was a man with a story that deserved to be told. And if they thought I was going to fade away quietly, they didn't know me at all. But even as I planned, the weight of it pressed on me. Every time I thought about the nights I'd spent in that office, lights low and coffee cold, trying to make sure no details slipped through the cracks, I felt a mix of pride and fury. Pride because I knew my work had been good. Fury because they'd taken that and turned it into something dirty. The betrayal still burned, but it didn't paralyze me anymore. It sharpened me. I was no longer the loyal employee who would take the blame to keep the peace. I was the man they'd underestimated, the one who'd turned every late night, every client call, every coffee-fueled brainstorm into a weapon. As I filed away the last of the emails I'd printed out, I looked out the window at the city lights. My heart was still bruised, but there was a new strength in my chest. They'd tried to erase me, to make me a footnote in their story, but I was going to write my own ending. And it was going to be louder, truer, and far more devastating than they could ever imagine. The day I decided to act was a Wednesday midweek, the perfect time for a storm. I woke up early, earlier than I had in weeks, my mind crystal clear with a plan. The weight of betrayal was still there, but it was no longer an anchor holding me down. It was fuel. I didn't bother dressing up for the occasion. I wanted to look like myself, like the guy who'd sat with clients in sweatshirts and jeans at midnight, hashing out last-minute ideas. No polished image, no forced smile, just me, raw and real. I walked into the office for the last time, feeling the buzz of nerves in my stomach, but also a calm, icy resolve. I'd called Marissa earlier that morning, and she was waiting in the lobby when I arrived. She gave me a nod, subtle but powerful. We were in this together. We took the elevator up in silence, but my mind was a roar of thoughts. I replayed every conversation, every lie, every manipulative move they'd made to push me out. Today, I was done being silent. As we stepped out onto the floor, I could feel eyes on us, whispers, curious glances. I didn't care. I walked straight to my manager's office and pushed the door open without knocking. He was at his desk, typing something that he quickly minimized when he saw me. "Jacob." "Yeah," he said, his voice dripping with false calm. "This isn't a good time, save it," I snapped. I dropped the stack of printed emails and meeting notes on his desk with a heavy thud. "We're going to talk about this." His eyes flickered to the papers, and I saw the slightest twitch. At the corner of his mouth, a crack in the mask. "I don't know what you think you're doing," he said, his tone slipping into condescension. "This is over. You're not part of this company anymore." I took a breath, feeling the tight coil in my chest loosen. "You're right, I'm not. But I'm also not the failure you're telling everyone I am. I've got the emails, the meeting notes, and the client messages. All of it. You can't keep spinning your lies forever." He tried to stand, to take control of the conversation, but Marissa stepped forward. "Jacob's not alone in this," she said, her voice steady and calm. "I've seen the work he's done, seen how you twisted it. You told me he was burning out like he was weak. But the only ones burning out are the ones who can't keep up with the truth." For a moment, there was silence on, electric pause, that felt like the air was charged with a storm. My manager's face hardened. "This isn't your concern, Marissa," he said coldly. "You're a client, this is internal." "No," she said firmly. "I'm a client who pays for results and honesty." Jacob delivered both. You didn't. His jaw worked, the smooth veneer slipping as he realized he was losing control. "You're making a mistake," he spat. "You think this will end well? For you, you'll burn every bridge you have." I smiled, and it felt like ice cracking in my chest. I'm done with bridges built on lies. I turned and walked out, Marissa at my side. We didn't stop at the door. We walked straight through the office, past the shocked faces of my former colleagues. I didn't look at them. I didn't need to see their guilt or their relief. Had bigger things to do. In the days that followed, I went public. I sent a carefully worded email to every client I'd worked with, explaining what had happened, sharing the documents that proved the truth.
Oh.
I didn't have to embellish or spin. It just showed them what was real. The betrayal spoke for itself. The reaction was immediate.
Ow.
Some clients reached out with fury, demanding answers from the company. Others offered me work, telling me they trusted me more than any brand name on a building. But the best part was the silence from the firm itself. Kind of silence that happens when the walls are crumbling and no one knows how to hold them up. I didn't stop there. Contacted a lawyer, someone who specialized in employment disputes and defamation. When he saw the evidence I'd gathered, he didn't hesitate. "You have a solid case," he said. "They tried to ruin your reputation. You have every right to set the record straight." Filing that suit was more than just about money. It was about taking back my dignity. It was about showing them that I wouldn't let them turn my name into a weapon against me in those final weeks. I felt every emotion, rage, relief, grief for the years I'd given them. But beneath it all was a sense of power I'd never felt before. They'd underestimated me because I played the part of the loyal soldier. But they didn't see the fighter underneath, the one who knew that integrity doesn't end when the paycheck stops, the day the lawsuit was officially filed. I stood on the courthouse steps, phone buzzing with messages from clients and friends who had my back. The city was bright around me, the sun cutting through the clouds like a promise. I looked up, feeling that weight lift off me for the first time in what felt like years. They'd tried to erase me, to rewrite my story to suit their needs. But I'd written my own ending. This was just the beginning. In the weeks that followed, my confrontation and the public release of my evidence, the fallout was swift and brutal. The company that had once prided itself on a shiny reputation found itself mired in questions it couldn't answer. Clients were pulling out of contracts, demanding explanations for the lies they'd been fed. The once proud name on the office doors suddenly carried the sour scent of betrayal and scandal. I watched from the sidelines, both vindicated and oddly hollow. There was no satisfaction in watching people I'd once shared coffee with whisper and point fingers. No triumph in knowing their carefully curated image was cracking under the weight of the truth. But there was relief, a cold, clean relief that finally the story was out there. And it wasn't just my word against theirs. The lawyer I'd hired moved quickly. Company's legal team tried to push back, offering settlements and half-hearted apologies. But I wasn't interested in their money. I wanted them to face the consequences of what they'd done. So I pushed forward, determined to make sure the truth couldn't be buried again. At night, I still wrestled with the anger and the sadness. I thought about the late nights I'd spent building relationships, the sense of belonging I'd once felt in that office. I thought about the loyalty I'd given so freely, only to have it twisted into something toxic.
Ow.
But slowly, I felt the weight of it start to lift. The emails from clients who told me they believed in me, the quiet messages of support from old colleagues who saw through the lies, it all chipped away at the bitterness, leaving something quieter and stronger underneath. I started to find a kind of peace in the chaos. I was no longer the man who'd walked out of that office in shock and shame. I was someone who'd faced the betrayal head-on and refused to let it define him. And that was worth more than any title or paycheck. The company, meanwhile, faced the music. Rumors of the lawsuit and the evidence I'd gathered spread quickly. Clients withdrew, lawsuits piled up. The once pristine office felt the chill of reputational damage that couldn't be scrubbed clean with PR statements. My manager, the one who'd orchestrated it all, was let go in a quiet, shame-faced exit. A fitting end for someone who thought he could bury me to protect himself in those final days of fallout. I realized something. The truth isn't just a weapon. It doesn't erase the pain of betrayal, but it dulls the sting. It gives you back the pieces of yourself that someone else tried to steal. And as I looked ahead, I knew there would be more battles, more scars. But I also knew I'd never again let anyone take my story from me. That was mine to tell, and I would guard it fiercely in the months after the fallout. I found myself in a place I hadn't expected, at peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes from everything being perfect hit. It was the kind that comes from knowing that no matter how bad it got, I'd stood up for myself, told the truth, and I'd refused to be small. I started working independently, consulting for clients who wanted more than just a flashy marketing firm. They wanted honesty, dedication, the very things I'd always given. The difference was, this time, I was working on my own terms. There was no manager standing over me, no corporate script twisting my words. Just me, the work I believed in, and clients who valued that at first. I thought I'd feel lost without the safety net of a steady paycheck and the so-called security of a company behind me. But every time I signed a new contract, every time a client told me they trusted me because of how I'd handled the fallout, I felt a new kind of power. I wasn't just rebuilding my career, I was rebuilding my sense of self. I also reconnected with old friends, people I'd pushed aside in the scramble to be the perfect employee. Late-night coffees turned into long conversations about what we'd all learned from the corporate game, how easy it is to lose yourself in the hustle, how important it is to know who you are when the ground crumbles beneath you. One night, sitting on my small balcony with a cup of coffee and the city lights stretching out around me, I realized something profound. I'd been living my life for someone else's approval. I'd spent years trying to be the man who made everyone else comfortable, even if it meant burning myself out in the process. Getting fired had ripped that mask away. It had hurt like hell, but it had forced me to see who I was without the company badge and the carefully curated title. I was stronger than I'd ever given myself credit for, and I was done letting anyone else tell me what that strength should look like. The lawsuit moved forward, not as a grudge, but as a promise to myself and to everyone who's ever been told that their best wasn't good enough. It was a declaration that integrity matters more than profit margins, that loyalty isn't something you can twist to suit your needs. As for my former company, I heard from colleagues that they were still reeling, trying to rebuild what they'd so carelessly torn apart. But that wasn't my concern anymore. I'd stopped looking back. The chapter was closed, the lessons learned, and my focus was forward. I started sleeping better, 2 deeper. dreamless sleep that felt like a luxury after years of restless nights. I woke up with purpose, no longer haunted by the fear of not measuring up. My worth wasn't tied to a performance review or a manager's fleeting approval. It was something solid, built on the foundation of everything I'd survived. I knew there would be challenges ahead. The world doesn't stop spinning because you've found your footing, but I also knew I could face them. I'd faced betrayal, lies, and a system that wanted to use me up and spit me out. And I'd come out the other side with my head high and my heart intact. This wasn't the life I'd planned. It was better. It was mine, looking back. I realized that getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me, even though it didn't feel that way at first. It was a brutal, painful ending that forced me to confront not just the lies of others, but the quiet lies I'd been telling myself for years. That if I worked hard enough, if I cared enough, I'd be safe from betrayal. The truth is, life doesn't work that way. No amount of overperforming can protect you from people who are afraid of your light. But here's what I've learned. You don't have to dim your brilliance to make others comfortable. You don't have to swallow your voice too. Fit into a system that doesn't see your worth. And when they try to take your story and twist it into something ugly, you can stand up. You can reclaim your narrative and turn their betrayal into your own victory. I've come to believe that real strength isn't about never falling. It's about refusing to stay down when the world tries to break you. It's about taking the lessons of pain and using them as stepping stones, not chains. It's about knowing that even in the darkest moments, your truth is still your own and no one can take that from you. As I stand here now, I feel a quiet sense of pride that has nothing to do with titles or trophies. It's the pride of having faced the worst in people and still finding the best in myself. It's the pride of knowing that no matter what they said, I never stopped believing in the power of my own voice. If you're listening to this, if you've ever felt like your best wasn't enough, I hope you hear this one simple truth. You are more than what they see. You are more than their fears or their need to control. You're the only one who can define your worth. So let them talk. Let them spin their stories. In the end, the only story that matters is the one you write for yourself. And I promise you this, that story is worth telling.